had me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello. Good afternoon, everybody. 5 o'clock on a Friday. Time for another episode of Cello Chat. Super excited this week to have with me Jean-Michel Fonteneau. Jean-Michel, how are you doing?
I'm great. I've had a wonderful end of 2023 and a great start of 2024. So I would like to wish you and everybody else a happy New Year, full of cello playing, of course.
Outstanding. Well, thank you very much. All right. Well, can you, for the people who don't know you as well as they will, can you give an overview to how you got your start on the cello and how your musical journey to where you are today?
Okay. Well, let's see. I'll try to make it not too long. It's probably a similar story to some of your listeners out there. In a way, I had a friend who was playing the violin, not the cello, and of course, just like every good friend in school, I wanted to do the same thing, and so I asked my parents to list me in a violin studio in that city of Chartres, the music school there where we were. Um, and long story short, again, it's just like the violin studio was full, but they were opening a cello studio. So they asked me if I wanted to play cello instead. And I said yes, without knowing at all what the cello was like or anything like that. So this started that, and my mother and I went to Paris to get a cello from one of those Milan violin shops that were there close to the Paris Conservatory in Paris, Rue de Rome. And I literally fell in love with the sounds. There was actually a cellist in the back of the shop that was trying instruments. The smells in there sort of, spoke to me in some ways. We got the cello. We stopped at the sheet music shop next door, and I bought the Lalo concerto. Um, I had learned to read music actually in school. It was the time still in France when music was taught in regular schools very well. So, and I got back home with the cello and the Lalo concerto and unpacked the cello immediately and started to play. And I didn't stop for the whole afternoon. And after that, um, you know, uh, I really never stopped. I was lucky to have great teachers, and that were inspiring right from the start. And yeah, that's the way I got started. Um, I I I got a lot of hints from my first teacher who kept asking me if I wanted to become a professional cellist right from the get-go. And um my passion at the time was physics, and I didn't want to do anything else but physics. But playing cello was really fun, so I kept on like that. Um, and then when I turned 18, there was a big anniversary. It was Casal's 100th birthday celebration at the time. And my teacher's teacher was Paul Tortelier, who was just an incredible, acclaimed French soloist of the time, one of the greatest names in cello playing in the 20th century. And he was scheduled to play all the Bach suites at the Prad Festival in the Pyrenees, a festival that Casals founded. And I went there. Um, I I wrote the mayor of the town, asking him for housing, and the mayor replied and told me that there was a music a music camp in addition to the festival where I could find housing, and I got there. They got me a cello. I went in and participated in all the master classes there. So you can imagine all the music greats were there at the time, of course, to celebrate Casal's 100th birthday was a big deal. And when this was over, I came back home and told my parents I was switching from physics to music. Yeah.
And then how did you your schooling then led you to a long successful string quartet career before you ended up at San Francisco Conservatory?
So I started at my college studies at the École Normale de Musique in Paris, and chamber music was always my passion, even for my first year of cello. Actually, maybe I should talk about that. As a first year cellist, when I was 13, they allowed me to play a chamber concert at the end of the year with the music director and oboe advanced oboe student there, and so I played continuo with them. I still have my review from the newspapers, local newspaper, and everything like that, and I just loved it. So my passion for chamber music really started right from my first year with the cello. I understood that pretty clearly. I was lucky for that. When I was so then in college in Paris, I went to great lengths to create chamber ensembles with my friends. So piano there, I had a piano trio. I created three chamber orchestras with my friends in Paris and around Paris. Played a lot of concerts during the season and during the summer season as well with them. So, I got the bug pretty well. Got infected by it quite well. And then I moved to Brittany. I got my first job there. For concerts in a regional orchestra, but that was also involved with a lot of chamber music and outreach towards in Brittany for all the music schools and communities. So it was very active with that. So mostly very little orchestra, but mostly chamber orchestra and chamber music and some teaching as well. So I did that, and I was interested by the way it was done. So I created a string quartet in '86 when I was in Lyon. I had moved to Lyon at that time, and we were two of us were French, and the violist was Hungarian, just recently migrated to France from Budapest. He was a really famous string quartet at the time, and so wanted to start one. And the second violinist was Japanese, who had been a resident in France for quite some years already. And so we all started, and it went pretty quickly. We just put together a program, and then many more. And then we did the Evian String Quartet competition, which is now Bordeaux international competition. They moved locations. And we got noticed by a lot of people there. So we started our career that way. And it became really clear that if we wanted to give our quartet a chance, we'd have to leave all our jobs that we were doing. So we all had positions in various orchestras in Lyon. And so I created a residency for string quartet out of that idea of what happened in Brittany a few years earlier, and out of necessity and how we could create something that would make sense for Lyon and its region, and the lack of access to chamber music in France at the time. It's no longer the case now, but at the time it was pretty poor. So I interviewed my colleagues for a few months, and then wrote down a proposition, a project, and went to Paris and defended my project. And the lady said, "You got the money," and it started that way, just creating residencies out of not a university or a music school, because at the time that was not even an option in France. We did that through theaters, so venues. So yes, that was interesting. Like working with the first residency was working with the theater which was next to Lyon, and our project was to create audiences for our concerts. So we of course worked a lot with schools, and then the kids invited parents to the concerts, and we had house concerts, where the parents invited their friends also. So pretty quickly we created a very large audience for our concerts in Lyon, around Lyon, and then it went all the way to the south of France after a few years.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. And then you ended up at San Francisco Conservatory.
Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah. So that was 99. Yeah.
What brought that about?
Um, well, sometimes life with quartets is not always the most fulfilling one, when there are problems, and the problems that we had with the quartet after a long time, but was more of a administration problem, when the administration started to tell us what to do musically and all of that. So it felt like maybe it was time to move on for me. And the other reason is that I actually met my wife in a festival in the US, my soon-to-be wife, in a festival in the US. So we had been long distance relationship for about 4 years, and decided to, okay, well, move on and see if there's something out there in the US that worked. She was in San Francisco, and there was a position open there. So I came and visited quite often San Francisco, course, and just got to know the teachers there, and ultimately got the position at that time. The big draw for me, in addition to that, was that the San Francisco Conservatory of Music had a very important chamber music program, there, with like great chamber players, American chamber players. Robert Mann, the violinist founder of the Juilliard Quartet, was coming to our school twice a year. So play with us, but also give master classes and all of that, and so many other great musicians.
All right. Outstanding. So I understand, I mean, it's never ideal, let alone, or I should say it the other way around, pleasant, let alone ideal, to be told artistically what to do as a quartet. And it brings to mind the fact that in your own teaching philosophy, you talk about finding and cultivating the uniqueness in each of your students.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, of course, I think there are a lot of us teachers who do not want to make just cookie cutter molds of ourselves, but sometimes that's easier said than done. What do you do to try to teach to each individual to keep and bring out their unique musical voice?
Mm. Great question. Yes. Uh, well, as you said, we're all unique, regardless. We all play cello, or it's, we do that for different reasons. And one of the first questions to ask my students is why they chose cello. And so, depending on how old they are, responses are, they vary so much, but they're so interesting because it tells a lot about the students themselves, and where they are in their how inspired they are with that. And so this is usually a good starting point. And whatever they're telling me, I'll do my best to address that in lessons. So, for instance, well, I have a good example of a student that I started to teach when she was 6. But at that time, I was no longer taking, young students like that. But she was already kind of so talented and able to play so well on the cello, on her 16 size cello, that I said, okay, well, there's definitely a lot there, and I'm interested. And we were talking about things, and she said one of the first things she told me was, and she looked at me and she said, it's going to be difficult to schedule lessons because I have already so many concerts. Yeah, so okay, well, let's see. Let's see. And but she was able to learn things. So it's kind of a uh not every student is that talented from the beginning, but just allowing students to be themselves is my telltale sign for them. And what I do after that is, I give them opportunities to play with me as often as possible. Um, I studied with the Feuillard, the young cellist method,
Mm-hmm.
that which has these very very short pieces at the bottom of every page, where the student plays the top line and the teacher plays the bottom line. So I do that, and if they're more advanced, then I'll go, and play the piano part of whatever piece they're doing. And but really collaborating, and it's just involving the two of us in a real relationship. So that's usually the way I start.
Excellent.
Uh,
Yeah, students in duets like that, they have a tendency to emulate what we're modeling, which is great.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well, I share your passion for chamber music. I kind of think the whole world would be better off if we all played in chamber ensembles and learned all that there is to learn from what is required to play chamber music well. But what is it that you love best about chamber music in particular?
Hmm. Wow. How to suggest something with sound, so without talking, just the sound in itself suggests something, and see how the others are actually taking taking up my offer for them to go this way or that way. And it doesn't matter whether it works or not. It's just, again, a real collaboration between two human beings at a different level. We respond to sound, of course. We respond to rhythm, uh, and body language. The nonverbal cues and everything like that are fascinating to me. And so that's I, I just love it so much that way. And of course, you know, the repertoire in itself, since I was in the string quartet, is incredible. Not that the cello repertoire is bad at all, but the string quartet repertoire. Now that I'm no longer in a fixed string quartet, I miss doing that at that level for sure.
Well, that kind of segues nicely to another question I have. I imagine that your passion you had for physics years ago probably hasn't gone away. Do you remain fascinated by the physics of music?
Well, yeah, it hasn't gone away. Of course, I'm no longer able to read the mathematical equations and everything like that. It's just like sometimes I look back at my books and it's just, I don't understand this. But the the interest about what physics is becoming. I mean, the research and new discoveries are nonstop and fast arriving. Last night I was watching that documentary on um, the new telescope, James Webb State, space telescope, and I just love that. And but anyway, so what I like, what the way have used physics and my mind for physics in the past and as of today, uh, is a sense of organization. Um, Somehow, when I was practicing, when I studied in Paris in college, I I found out exactly the best way for me to build up my technique and my musicianship. Just realized since I had so much time in front of me during those days, I would organize my time in different layers. And I was very systematic about it, and I got very fast results because of that. So starting with um, basic basic exercises, basic learning of musicianship, solfege and stuff, and then more advanced exercises, etudes, of course, Bach in that order, and then concerto, and then whatever other pieces, sonatas, solo cello stuff. Um, and then at the end of the day, I would cap it all with um, sight reading.
Nice.
Would just like keep about 20, 30 minutes, depending of sight reading.
That's great.
So again, I was lucky to have that much time, at the time. But
Yeah. Yeah,
that was fascinating for me.
all right. Something that you said in your answer just made me think of on some of your YouTube videos of you playing. I think more than a number of other cellists, I'm struck by the degree to which it looks like you are intentionally um, what's the word I want? Choreographing your bow distribution. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
You seem to have a lot of fun moving to this part of the bow or that part of the bow for particular articulations. That's not my imagination, is it?
No, it's not. Yeah, not at all. It's well, the at the start of that was pretty much my first days with the cello, even before getting a lesson. I quickly realized that the bow was nothing else but a nice, very nice spring. So I just figured out how to make it bounce right from the start and did all kinds of rhythms and stuff. And it was very fun
Yes.
to do that. So I never stopped that way to explore what the bow, what the cello can do. Having a curious mind is definitely something I still do have. And my first teacher was uh, using, in addition to the feuillard, the method, we had the daily exercises. So the Sevcik inspired exercises that he has um, in that book have to do with bow distribution very systematically. For those of you listening, it's actually page 39. I know that now.
I love it.
It starts there. All the bow exercises are and variations are at the end of that book, and you just if you just do the bow distributions the way they are, all of a sudden you have a very thorough command of the bow for sound. So that's the basis of what I do, and then curiosity about finding sounds here or there, or moving the bow this way or that way. That's coming more from my experiences with my quartet when we were talking so much about that all these years, like what is this way to find this sound or that sound, uh, Beethoven quartet or Bartok or anything, and just my experience with pieces. I've done a lot of modern cello pieces as well, and that repertoire requires that you find solutions, on the spot, when you learn them, and just getting that out all of a sudden gives you a lot of repertoire for that, uh, for bow expression. And
Nice.
I guess the last thing I can think of is my own personality. I um, I like telling stories. Um, and I'm kind of impish, with in maybe not right now, but in social situations, I am very playful, and if the occasion presents itself within a group where people are responding to that, I will go there. Not to make the piece that we're playing something clownish or anything like that. It's just more like if there's fun involved, uh, there will be definitely a chance to do that. And so
Yeah.
being creative with that or fingerings or whatever is part of me.
Yeah, bring it to life. I love that. All right, another thing I'd love for you to talk about a bit, because I think it's such an important way of thinking for particularly the younger folks watching this, is the degree to which you're an innovator. I mean, there are expressions in life about when opportunity knocks, but then there are people who don't wait for opportunity to knock. They just go and do new things. So whether it's the residency that you talked about, or the starting of chamber orchestras, or what you've done with the curriculum at San Francisco, some of the types of things that you have your students do, whether it's related to neuroscience or learning how to run concert series. You are an innovator. Can you talk a bit about how it's like there are people who shy away at first. They're going, oh, that's something new, and so they kind of they pull back, and you don't seem to do that.
Yeah, I think I'm driven by the necessity of going to something new when I see that the old models are not necessarily useful for whatever venue I'm interested in embarking. Um, the example of the residency in France was was one because we needed to have a solid foundation for the quartet, so that it would allow us to have the time to rehearse without having to and develop the quartet and its career without having to go and gig elsewhere. So, and that there was no such thing in France at the time. Now every string quartet over there has a residency, and things evolved. And, the world gets smaller too. But I think it comes to me from a mindset of a musician. When we're practicing and learning new pieces, sometimes you've got to find solutions out of the box. Remembering the first time I learned a modern piece and in college, and I hated modern music at the time. No longer the case. Um, but I had no way of understanding what the composer meant by this or that, even though there was some, a glossary and this means that, this means that. So you have to understand what it means for you, and searching solutions all of a sudden they become technique as well, a new technique for yourself, something, a new way to express oneself. So that mentality, like being curious about finding the best sound possible in a Beethoven, for instance, how do you do that? It's not like a one size fits all. It also depends on the four players and the instruments and the moment, so I think that's part of my life now. And so every time as a teacher or as a performer, I see, oh, what if we did that instead of the old stuff? What would happen? And yes, you're right. I don't shy away from that. And sometimes I fail. And that's also part of the learning. And and as we all know in practicing, it's just like sometimes practicing something in a certain way fails. So the learning is, well, try differently. Don't give up and try differently, and then see where you're going. So in a way, it's just very similar, you know, being a musician. We With my wife, we had during the COVID years, during the pandemic, when everybody was at home, we decided to put our gifts to good use, and so created kind of a weekly podcast on Facebook Live, and every Sunday morning, and she would do her thing. She would address the situation at the time, and I would play and I would talk about certain things depending. That's, those things that they always pay you back in a way. It's very rewarding to take a risk and then put yourself out there. Yeah.
I like that. I like that. That attitude is one I hope a lot of my students and others watching this will adopt. All right, I have two more questions. One of them is the question I ask everybody, the idée fixe of this series, motivating students when they want to achieve a particular level, but maybe they're not in the habit of getting out the instrument and figuring out how to get themselves to do the work that needs to be done. Do you have some kind of go-tos as far as ways to help inspire students to put in the work to achieve the next level?
Yeah. What I've noticed, and as much for myself as for others, is that we tend to, and you're right, we tend to procrastinate when we're not inspired. And so just again, trying to get back my students or myself in an inspiring spot is what I usually try and do. So these are the questions that I would ask my students if they'd remember their first time when they decided to become a cellist, potentially a professional cellist, if I'm talking to my college students, for instance. So that moment, and it usually helps in a way, as long as I keep them there. So it's just like if they're inspired, if it's not inspired, but if their parents are pushing, then we're going to have a different conversation, because they might not feel that inspired about that. Some of them are, actually. So it just depends on what speaks to us. Yeah, it's usually on a case by case situation, really. But I would start with that. Now, as a general conversation, um, there there are moments where it's I find it better to to have my students go out for a coffee and just talk it through. Just have it a nice moment instead of the sanctity of the cello studio, the room, where students get afraid of the teachers. And I'm talking, I'm talking because I know that, it's just like, it's not like I'm a scary person. It's just more like it's the teacher-student relationship. So it's just taking, usually taking the student out helps, just to have a real conversation when we're really stuck. Um, and there are also things that are helpful. Sometimes if I give an exercise that's too hard, I would change it. I would give it time for that to develop, and instead replace it with an easy piece that we could actually sight read right there and then during the lesson. Uh, just changing the perspective. But and I always tell my story. Um, as a beginner, first few years, I didn't practice much. I should not say that, but I did not practice much. But when I practiced, I actually did make it count. And the way I was doing that is that I would on my dad's tape recorder, I would record the bass line of the Feuillard method, the piece,
Mhm.
and then I would play over it. And I was so inspired by that.
Hmm.
Not everybody might be inspired by that, just like record the bass line in the piano part of your concerto or sonata or something, and then play along with it, the cello after that, play along with the recording. I just loved it. And speaking of chamber music, right? Or speaking of having a personal relation to the music itself. So I tell these kinds of stories. I would also have asked the students tell me what they would feel inspired by. If it's not by this, what else is there uh, for them?
Mhm.
Um,
That's
yeah, it's kind of a general question. Of course, after that, you yeah, I'd feel it out with the students themselves.
right, right. You're back to the each student being unique individuals.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
all
I
right,
mean,
go ahead.
what I do is, also, I often take my students to master classes or concerts. Like if there is a great soloist, coming into town, uh, then we'll take them to their concert or to their master class, and they usually are inspired at
Yes.
that point, because and they will notice things that I don't know, Stephen Isserlis would have said, and that they've heard many times before, not necessarily from me only, but from many other places, and it was just like, it's the first time I heard that. Now they got it, and it works.
Yeah.
It works. So I think the information needs to be repeated as many times as possible. Also,
Mhm.
um,
That's true. And in different ways. Good point. All right, Jean-Michel, projects for 2024, concerts, what's coming down the pike?
um, well, there's I one thing that I've been doing now for more than 15 years. Playing on period instruments is another thing that I've always loved doing, but I've been doing that regularly at the Rice University at Shepherd School of Music. When Sergio Luca was running the series, and now Brian Connolly is there running this. So it's going to be in March. I think it's March 24th. Um, there. So Brahms first piano trio, and I'm sorry, Schumann first piano trio and Brahms second piano quartet on period instruments. So we have a Bösendorfer piano, was built in 1852, and we're all playing on our instruments, but with gut strings and not modern bows, but bows that still are kind of the modern technique, but that were made at the time. I have one such bow, and it's nice. Yeah, so that inspires me, and so that's one thing. And then, of course, during the summer, a lot of festivals. I'm part of the Yellow Barn Festival in Vermont. So I teach for half the time in the Young Artist Program, which is in June. So the first part of that, which is after June 10th or something like that. And then the whole Yellow Barn Festival for older participants. So starting first beginning of July. And then after that, it will be at Orford Music Academy. And then at the end of the summer, I will be in China. It's going to be my first time back to China since 2019.
Right.
China sort of closed in 2020, and so after that, we had to wait. So now I'm very excited to be able to go back there. There's usually concerts and teaching, Beijing, Shanghai, and I don't know what other cities we're going to go and visit there. So exciting.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
To see old colleagues from over there.
Yes, sure. Well, best of luck with all of it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jean-Michel. This has been wonderful visiting with you, and I look forward to visiting with my own students as far as their thoughts and reactions. So, yeah, it's just been a wonderful, wonderful time having you on Cello Chat. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for your questions too. It's been really, really wonderful having a chance to talk with you as well.
All right, yeah. Wonderful. Well, everybody out there, happy practicing all week, and we'll see you this time next Friday. Take care. You had me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello.